Good morning. My name is Angela Belsham and I am the Corporate Officer for the SLRD. I am calling this January 12th, 2026 Policy Development and Review Committee meeting to order. We would like to recognize that this meeting is being held on the traditional territory of the Lillooet Nation. The first order of business is election of the office of Chair and Vice Chair as required each year. I would like to thank Director Rainbow and Director Pettengill for holding the positions of Chair and Vice Chair over the past year. With that, I would like to call for nominations for the office of Chair for the Policy Development and Review Committee for the year 2026. Calling a first time for nominations of the Chair.
I'll nominate Chris Pettengill for Chair, please.
Director Pettengill, do you consent to the nomination?
Yes.
Calling a second time for nominations of the Chair. Calling a third and final time for nominations of Chair. As only one nomination has been received, Director Pettengill is acclaimed to the office of the Chair of the Policy Development and Review Committee for 2026. I will now turn the meeting over to them for the election for the office of Vice Chair.
Thank you, everyone. So I will call for nominations for position of Vice Chair. Director Stoner?
I'd like to nominate Vivian Birch-Jones.
Okay, and Director Ford?
I was also going to nominate Vivian if she'll accept.
And Director Birch-Jones, will you accept the nomination?
Sorry, I was completely unable to turn off my audio or to turn it on. Thank you very much. Yes.
Okay, excellent. And do we have any other nominations? Okay, not seeing any. I declare that Director Birch-Jones is the Vice Chair for 2026 of the Policy and Governance Committee. So thank you, everyone. With that, we'll proceed with the agenda and actually just take the moment to acknowledge that I am calling in from the unceded territory of the Squamish Nation, and just ask everyone to take a minute to think about and be thankful for the territories from where you are joining from. Our regional district crosses many traditional and unceded territories. With that, I will call for a motion to approve the agenda. Director Ford, Director Birch-Jones seconds. Thank you. All those in favor, motion carries. I don't think we have any closed business. Is that correct? Okay. And nothing to rise and report on. So the next is the consent agenda. If there's nothing that anyone wants pulled, does someone want to move the consent agenda? Director Stoner moves. Director Ford seconds. All those in favor, or sorry, anyone opposed? No, motion carries. Thank you. And new business. And this is our terms of reference.
Chris, I just want to interrupt for a second. Maybe
Sure.
you went by it, but we talk about business arising from the minutes.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Is there any business arising?
I just, our last meeting, we had that sort of extensive discussion around payment in lieu of taxes funding, but if I understand it, we're going to just move that forward. I thought maybe Board Chair Ford might want to comment on that. There was a few items that were to be followed up, but we pushed them.
And as I understand it, there have been a couple of proposed changes to the policy from the provincial government that our staff are looking into. So they don't want to bring it back until they have a better understanding of what those changes might look like. And so it'll come to a future meeting.
Okay.
Am I right about that, CAO Paul? Okay.
Yes, you're correct. There are proposed changes. We're not sure if it's policy or funding amounts, but we want to ensure that we know what that is prior to bringing it forward.
So we'll get those provincial updates and then we'll consider that. And thank you.
And if I can elaborate, we are scheduled to open up the PILT in 2026, so we're not behind any schedule. We're still well in advance of our current schedule.
And I'll just add, I think we are aware this is a big topic, and so we'll try and make sure everyone is well aware, and that we can have as many people at the meeting as possible and give it a good discussion. Probably be a good discussion at our committee and the board as well.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you. With that, we'll move on to the terms of reference for this committee. Am I turning it over to you, CAO Paul?
Thank you. I believe Gail is here to
okay.
present.
Yeah, so over to you, Gail, please. Thank you.
Yes. Hello, Gail Harris, Legislative Coordinator with SLRD. Staff are presenting the proposed terms of reference for the Policy Development and Review Committee's consideration. This terms of reference clarifies the committee's purpose and updates its mandate to include governance matters. The terms of reference is also modelled on the electoral area directors' terms of reference to ensure consistency with other committee TORs as they are developed, and it also outlines the committee's context, purpose, and structure. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Director Birch-Jones.
Couple of comments. First of all, I thought it was a good suggestion to add governance to the title. And I should say, for some reason, and I've checked all my volume buttons here, the volume on this system isn't working very well, so I'm not hearing super well. But yeah, I thought it was a good suggestion to add governance to the title if that sort of fits with the thinking of everyone else. And thanks to staff for suggesting it.
Great, thank you. I just had a couple of questions. One, I think it came up at a meeting a little while ago, just to confirm that alternate directors are automatically able to come for internal committees such as this. It's just the external appointments where it needs to be that individual explicitly appointed. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And I just wondered, sort of looking through this, and I don't think it's necessary, and this is maybe more of a question to my colleagues than to staff, but is it worthwhile being explicit that the recommendations we make are meant to be consistent with the board's strategic plan, vision, mission, and values? And similar to that, just is it worthwhile including any expectations of, when there's a unanimous recommendation versus when we have a split? Should there be an expectation that that's part of the discussion or what gets shared to the board, that we didn't actually reach a consensus on this piece? I think it's our practice really to do all of those things, but just, is it worth expressing explicitly in the terms of reference?
Well, you asked, sorry, through the chair, I assumed you were directing that to your colleagues, yes.
Sure, I'm not seeing any hands, so I take that as people are sort of okay with it is as written. Director Stoner?
A reflection on your question, I think it could be more explicitly defined. I think it is kind of by our nature, but I think maybe including it in, I'm actually just trying to figure out where you would actually include it in the existing sections of the bylaw. So maybe it is a clarifying question to staff as to whether in our draft, in like the terms of reference structure that we have, is there an anticipation that it all just falls in line with the existing higher level policy, strategic plan, values type of work? Or should we be more explicit about that in the terms of reference document?
CAO Paul?
Sorry, I was considering staff's response to that, Ms. Harris's response to that.
I'll defer to Ms. Belsham.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I can speak to that. So within the mandate, 3.1C, we do say that the committee will make recommendations to the SLRD board regarding general governance issues and ensure alignment with the board's strategic objectives. However, we can build that out to include vision, mission, values, language, if that would be the preference of this policy, the policy committee.
I guess that would be sort of my inclination, and also, maybe something. I'm not sure how people feel about saying anything about recommendations that are unanimously supported by the committee versus there's like a 3-4 split, if that sort of thing is worthwhile. Being explicit, we communicate that, or again, it's been our practice to share that. But Director Belsham saw a hand.
Yeah, I mean, that could be communicated through when recommendations flow through to the board. The committee could speak to that. It is not our practice in the procedure bylaw in which to define the directors that vote for or against any motions.
Right.
So that's not a practice within our minutes, as it's not part of the procedure bylaw. But it certainly could be part of the communications piece when recommendations are coming forward.
Okay. Director Stoner?
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair, I'm just picking up on Director Birch-Jones's comments around including governance. I have a mixed feelings about this. I feel like the length of work that already exists under policy review is quite lengthy. And increasing the scope of the committee to include governance issues as presented feels a little bit nebulous. And so I'm just curious, I think maybe this is a question to my colleagues too, in terms of what sort of governance issues do we expect to come to this committee? If it's not specifically just policy review and development. I mean, they're tied in some ways for sure, but I don't expect a governance issue at the board to be hashed out by this committee.
Right.
And so I just want to be really cognizant about the language that we include in the terms of reference, because I feel like just that simple language of governance issues could open up a can of worms.
So, Director Ford?
And I think we have a fairly robust policy around how we deal with governance issues, such as conflicts of interest and those kinds of. There's a policy that's included in the legislation, in the community charter, and in the local government act. So I don't want to rewrite the policy or take that. Let the existing legislation deal with that. I think how we enact those governance items within our policy committee is important, but I don't want this to become sort of a tribunal of governance issues.
CO Paul?
Thank you. Some background on the suggestion for governance. A lot of the policy administration, the policy review here is part of governance. And in a recent report by, I believe it was Canadian Small Business, they flagged that the SLRD was a regional district that did not have a governance committee because it wasn't assumed that there's a lot of governance work happening on this policy committee. So the idea of putting governance in there provides some clarity. And perhaps we could add what it is not, if you'd like to expand on Director Ford's comments, which is it's not a tribunal, and those are managed through the code of conduct and the other authorities. If it supports.
Director Stoner?
Yeah, Through the chair, I hear that there's like definitely a link there. I'm not overly concerned in responding to that report that was presented. It had many flaws in the way it did its work, by the fact that they can't actually tie the fact that policy and development review is tied to governance is maybe one indication that they could have done a better job in their research. But I feel like, again, the list is so long on the number of policies that we need to review. And they are totally focused on how we do our work well as a board, and we set direction for staff. And so I hear the like direct link there. I just have hesitation around including the general words around governance issues. I'm happy to fold it into language around kind of the high level mandate of like, we are reviewing the policies and bylaws to ensure that there is good governance and clear transparency and efficiency for the organization, for the board and the staff to do their jobs and do our work. But I feel like as presented, we risk opening up this can of worms. And so maybe it is just a tightening up of the mandate a little bit. The other piece that I was curious about is just expanding on 3.1B, which just says recommend new policies. And I'd like to scope that to recommending new policies specifically around improving policy and procedure for the organization, not just any given policy we might want to bring forward.
So if I can interject, and I just want to make sure, my understanding was that this is not a place where we sort of adjudicate or sort of decide if there's a challenge, like who's right and who's wrong or consequences. That's not at all what we do here. But my recollection is there has been a fair bit of, and obviously the board will always make the final decision, but we might do some of the legwork about, do we want to do more delegation or different delegation or what's our decision-making process, or those governance type of things, policies this committee would definitely do. And so that was sort of my understanding. Are we sort of all saying the same thing at this point, or is there a bit of a difference there? Director Stoner?
I think we're all saying the same thing. I think the committee focuses on policy, procedure, and bylaw that improves how the organization works effectively. So it's like the foundation of our governance work. It's making sure that the SLRD board and staff can do their jobs well and with clear guidelines. So those definitely, like the delegated authority bylaw is one that we have talked about, which is inherently tied to governance structures, but it's still policy and procedures focused. It's not all governance issues that might come up.
So can we suggest some wording? I think we sort of because I think there's a suggestion that we provide a bit more clarity on what we mean by governance in this context. Do we want to take a minute and just think about what that wording might be? Director Stoner?
So I think I've heard two things. I think one would be a consideration of adding in section 2 under authority an explicit reference to strategic objectives, OCP, and values. So that kind of high level, like the context within which we make these decisions. And then the other component would be to clarify in 3.1 the mandate, I think under A. It'd almost just be like conduct a review of existing SLRD board policies and bylaws to ensure they remain relevant, timely, and provide guidance for the SLRD board and staff to conduct its business in clear and efficient manner or something like that. And you could almost just take out the rest of it. And then add some further detail to 3.1B around recommend new policies that improve, specifically around, recommend new policies and procedures to improve organizational governance and something. I mean, I think we could argue whether we take out C.
Okay, so I would suggest for the in 2, I think it's mission, vision, values, strategic plan, and RGS are probably the primary guiding documents, or is that, I'm seeing nods there.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Director Ford.
Thank you. You know, I think if we were gonna rewrite this section 3, I think I like the idea of what's here, except if we put in sort of the traditional definition of good governance, being accountable to the public, and this is an area, this committee is meant to set good policy and have an oversight of policy before it's adopted by the board. This is almost, you know, the definition of good governance needs to be included in the mandate so that that's the understood reason that this policy committee exists. And then the rest of it can kind of is sort of redundant. So that would be my recommendation, if that helps.
So a definition for good governance, basically. Is there a singular
like is
definition?
the mandate? So I
Okay.
mean, like you could find a one sentence, you know, what is, why do public institutions govern, you know, and then a one sentence of this is the mandate of the policy is to ensure that we're adhering to the principles of good governance as directed by the Local Government Act, the OCP, and other governing documents of our organization. Without getting into, you know, we're going to oversee the writing of policies and because that's precisely what we're doing here. I think it's just clunky language, and I think we can simplify it. And I think we could probably ask staff to go away and come back with a revised mandate of simpler, like of more simple language that understands what the mandate of the policy committee is. They've done a great job here. And I don't want to take away from, I think it got too complicated.
Okay, so a reference to the guiding documents and then a reference to meeting the objective of achieving good governance.
The principles of good governance. Which,
okay, is that clear enough for staff if we leave it there, or do you need a bit more clarity? Can I ask?
Thank you, Chair. That's enough clarity for staff to take away and revamp the mandate, and we can bring it back to the policy committee at their next meeting. Okay,
so can I'll put forward a motion that staff bring back an updated policy at the next possible opportunity with the changes as discussed. Is there a seconder? Director Stoner seconds. Any discussion? Director Birch-Jones?
So I'm in agreement to sort of not adding governance to the title. I understand the discussion behind that. But I have asked about bylaws before and if they belong under the umbrella of review by the policy committee, and are we adding that into A? Did I hear that correctly? So when we talk about A, conduct a review of existing SLRD board policies, are we adding anything else to that?
Director Ford?
I think I also heard, I think Director Stoner mentioned policy and bylaws. I feel like there's probably some legislative requirement that bylaws are considered at the board table rather than a committee. And so I don't think it could fit here. I think there's just a different procedure that has to be followed for bylaws. But policies set the desire of the board, which would then inform, the outcome of a bylaw. So, but I'm happy to be wrong on that.
Go to Director Stoner.
But all of our recommendations flow through the board. So if we're talking about all the items that we use for good governance, like delegated authority, like the remuneration bylaw, I suspect that those are things that would come to this committee for discussion and review. And then we'd make recommendations to the board, similar as to establishing a policy.
Yeah.
So unless, I'm happy also to hear from staff on this if I'm missing a procedural component, but I suspect that we would also be reviewing those components here and then making a recommendation.
CIO Paul, did you want to add anything there?
No, it did. Thank you. It sounded like a question for staff, and I'd like Director Belsham to respond to that. That'd be good.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, as referenced, the committee can do the work in reviewing all of the policies and bylaws that may be directed by the board to review. However, any passing of like first and third reading or adoption of bylaws must go through the board as per legislation, as well as any board policies would have to be approved by the board. But any of the work of those policies and reviews of bylaws can certainly be vetted through this committee before moving forward to the board with the recommendations of the committee. Thank you.
Okay, so
Good.
From the nodding of heads, and I know we've moved and seconded, but it sounds like there is desire to include bylaws as well as policies in our comments. Okay, so with that, I will call the question then. CIO Paul?
Thank you. Sorry, I just needed some clarity on this because we do have bylaws that are signed bylaws and we have a number of bylaws that go in front of the board. Our bylaw section at every board meeting is very robust. So I just wanted clarity on all those to be directed to the policy, or those that are related, just want to be clear, those related to governance and the overall management of the organization.
Yeah, good governance.
Thank you.
I think, yeah. Okay, thank you with that clarity. I will call a question. Anyone opposed? Seeing no opposition, motion passes. Thank you. The next topic, where are we here? Is our meeting calendar, and who are we going to for this?
Thank you. We've got Raylene Rahal, who is our legislative coordinator, here to present this report.
Yes, please proceed, Ms. Rahal.
Thank you. Good morning. This report brings the proposed 2026 meeting calendar for your consideration. And so the draft calendar includes 5 regular committee meetings. It is consistent with the previous year's dates, with meetings scheduled bi-monthly starting in March, with the exceptions that are noted in the report, and I'll cover them really quickly for you. July, where the meeting be held on the first Thursday due to the July 1st statutory holiday. September, where no meeting be held due to the UBCM convention, and rather the meetings be held in October and December. And then in December, where the meeting still be held December the 2nd. However, just to avoid conflict with the EAD committee meeting, that meeting be convened at 1:00 p.m. and staff are available for questions should you have any.
Director Birch-Jones?
Thank you. I'm good with all the dates. I wrote them out, so it's March 4th, May 6th, July 2nd, October 7th. But the only one that's a bit problematic for me is the December 2nd date. I'd prefer not to book it on the afternoon with the EAD. Only thinking about December travel and not wanting to push traveling back later on that day. And I don't want to switch to doing them both by Zoom. So this is just very much a personal preference and a request to change it either to the Tuesday before the EAD in December, December 1st, or the Thursday after the EAD would be my suggestion. So December 1st or 3rd.
December 3rd looks like there's PVIS, but I know Whistler and Squamish have Tuesday council meetings, so the Tuesday's probably out. But the Thursday could be an option. Seeing nods there, so maybe switch to December 3rd. Just a question, you know, the October meeting is like a week before elections. You know, we still have work to do and so on, but I just want to flag that, sort of recognizing we'll be sort of right at the very end of our terms possibly.
Mhm.
Okay,
I think
ahead.
it's not bad to leave it as it is, and this committee, as it's constituted now, would finish up the work that we've been doing, and rather than trying to shove it into, you know, the first week after election with prior to the swearing in of the new board. So I would leave it as it is for now, and it can be canceled at a future date if there's nothing to be considered by the committee. And with those friendly amendments from Director Birch-Jones, I would move the recommendation as laid out.
Okay, and that's to move to December 3rd for the December meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, and is there a seconder? Director Birch-Jones seconds. Any
And should
discussion?
for the record, should we just specify at 10 o'clock on the 3rd of December, just to be consistent with the other meetings?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, not seeing any hands for discussion. I'll call a question. Anyone opposed? Not seeing any opposition. Motion carries. Thank you very much. And now we are on to staff expense travel policy, possibly rescinding this. And who is taking this one?
Indeed, we've got Allison Twist, who's our senior policy analyst, and Colin Hodgins, who are joining the meeting.
Okay, welcome, and I'll put it over to the two of you.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Allison Twist, Senior Policy Analyst at the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District. The purpose of this report is to update the board staff expense travel policy, last amended May 15th, 2006, through rescinding it. If recommended by the policy committee to the board and then rescinded by the board, the staff expense travel policy will subsequently be replaced by a new administrative travel policy, which would automatically align staff travel reimbursement rates with those set by the Canada Revenue Agency, and that is comparable to and modeled after the travel reimbursement policies of other regional district governments. Anticipated changes to related financial costs are expected to be insignificant. As outlined in the staff report, the recommendation to this committee is that it be recommended to the regional board that the board policy number 5.5, expense travel, be rescinded. Board oversight will remain through the budget planning and approval cycle. Through the process of the board potentially rescinding the current staff travel expense policy and the administration then setting the new travel reimbursement policy, allowable reimbursement rates will be aligned with those of the regional board as well. Staff are available for questions, should you have any.
Okay, and are there any questions? Director Birch-Jones?
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I love what you're doing here. I wondered just in the definitions when I was reading through it, and having been someone who's had to approve a whole bunch of travel before, I'm looking for any ways it can be misinterpreted. And C, under definitions, SLRD business refers to activities intended to promote and achieve the goals and objectives of the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District. I thought that might be a little bit broad. Just might want to be narrowed down to travel required as part of the employee's work or incurred as part of fulfilling the employee duties, just a bit more specifically tied to work. That was a suggestion. And I also got stuck on the and maybe this is just going to be rescinded and is irrelevant, but with the expense claims, mileage may be claimed where it is reasonable. This is in 3.2 for an employee to use their personal cars. And then this line, proof of kilometers travel must be provided. And I thought there might be some better wording. I mean, a photo of your odometer or something comes to mind in terms of proof of kilometers traveled. I thought there's recognized kilometer distances between places that we could work with that might be, that reflect the distance that are perhaps easier. And I just wanted to confirm that I understand if receipts aren't being used, for an example, for meals, then the claim can be for 75% of the CRA daily rate. I'm following that properly, and we're not addressing incidentals. And I brought this up at the board too and before, and it's fine with me if we don't. I just wanted to be clear that there aren't incidentals as part of the CRA. So that's sort of a question. I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to CIO Paul, but I think the idea here is that this becomes essentially a staff policy. So our going forward, our level of sort of worrying about the details is sort of at the budget. Staff will deliver this much work at this much cost, and the CIO and her team sorts out the details of the expense and travel reimbursement from that, and will have the authority then to, if there are issues or things that prove problematic, to sort of change these details as needed. But with that, I will put it over to CIO Paul if you wanted to comment on any of the specific things mentioned.
Thank you, Chair. You described that perfectly, what I was going to say. I will say that we don't currently require photos of odometers. We are, through good management, aware of where staff are and going, and the wonderful technology of kilometer mapping is very helpful in that. So there's no intent to micromanage. It's to protect the organization should there be a question.
Okay, not seeing any more questions. Does someone want to move the recommendation? Okay, Director Birch-Jones moves. Director Stoner seconds. Any discussion? Not seeing any. I will call the question. Anyone opposed? Not seeing any opposition, motion carries. Thank you very much. And we are on to the communications policy review.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you all. My name is Patricia Westerholm, and I'm the Director of Communications and Engagement for the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District. I'm here today with a direction request regarding the Communications Policy Review and Update project to seek direction from the committee on the proposed path forward for that project. The report that is in the agenda package includes a summary of the work to date, including the survey responses from the board. And staff are seeking further direction on the next steps with this project, with the first and preferred option being that staff will come forward to a future committee meeting with the draft communications policy, replacing the existing outdated policy, incorporating board feedback received to date, and if there's any additional feedback received today. And I'm happy to take that additional feedback and also to answer any questions that you may have.
Hey, thank you. Any questions or from the board, from the directors? No, I just wanted to touch on one comment that I think I had made in the feedback, and that's just, you know, how we feel or if we have an opinion about the use of meta platforms and, you know, some of the bigger picture. I just personally, not even so much a political perspective, but there's just so much misinformation and agitation and so on these platforms. I do worry about whether it serves our community to be sort of encouraging people to go there to get information. I understand that the counterpoint to that is there is a lot of people there and it can be easy for them to get information, but then they're always, at the same time, they're going to see the good information we're providing, they're being blasted with all kinds of problematic stuff. And so is there anything we should be thinking about there? Should we say, no, let's just move away completely? It is, you know, our policy should just be, we pose the teaser, but really direct people to our own platforms, and that's where the real information is? Or do we have thoughts or concerns about that? Or, you know, maybe I'm on my own here. Director Ford?
Thanks, Chris. That's a really good point. And I think it's really, really important, especially in sort of an evolving landscape of are they posting news stories? Are they not posting news stories? We know, and especially this thing is changing so quickly. I think it's really important that we're very clear on where our information, where the SLRD generated information is housed, and that is on our website. So using a limited number of social media platforms to draw people to the accurate information is our number one mandate as a local government. And so moving away from, and especially, you know, people try and message you on your personal, you know, whether it's Messenger or they're trying to message you through Instagram to get information. And that feels out of control. For me personally, as you know, when I get questions on there, I try not to, like, I try and draw people to email me because I want that information to be open and transparent, and it does not feel transparent when it can easily be manipulated through those platforms. So I would love that policy to be extraordinarily clear, that you do not get your bylaw questions answered through an Instagram message. You know, especially if, you know, if we do have those channels. I know we don't use Instagram, but our staff shouldn't be required to be monitoring and following those channels.
Director Stoner?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a really interesting point of discussion in the policy going forward. Be curious to hear from staff what our current practice is in terms of using social media platforms and our response on them, or if we're really just using it as a channel flow for information? Is it one directional or bi-directional communication on social media?
Yes, through the chair. Our current approach is that we treat social media as one tool. And that we're using it, and we are using it as a vehicle to drive traffic to our website for official information. It still is an information tool that we do have control over the messaging that we share on our Facebook accounts, or our social media accounts, sorry. So we're not seeing at this point, although to be fair, we haven't spent a great deal of time looking into this deeply, but we're not seeing misuse of the information that we share. We occasionally receive comments on a post that could be, they can be helpful questions that that we address that helps to clarify information for the broader public as well. We're not seeing a lot of negative comments or posts on our content. Our reach through social media has been increasing year over year, which we find is particularly helpful in emergencies. But again, it's one tool that we use. It's really quick. And it's a good fast conduit to the website for our official information.
Yeah, I think that makes good sense. And I think just to Director Ford's point, as we move this work forward, just being really explicit that like social media is not a place that we will actively respond to. It's a place where we disseminate information. We may provide clarifying comments, but we're not going to like be responding to everything, or if you message us through it, we're not putting staff resources into necessarily monitoring Facebook Messenger, for example. That our priority communication tools continue to be SLRD primary.
Yes, and we do have some content on our the social media account that we use primarily as Facebook currently. We use X, formerly Twitter, in an emergency as well, just with the understanding that agencies like the RCMP, for example, use that channel a lot. So it's a really good, fast way to share important information in an emergency, but we have limited our use of X for specifically for emergencies. I will say that in looking at the content that we share and analyzing some of those metrics, our emergency related content that we share on Facebook is very well received, and is the most, the content that is most engaged with from the community. And engaged with it, I just mean resharing. It's the content that gets the most likes. We see a bump in our followers consistently with each emergency that we're handling. There's almost an immediate reaction that sees a positive increase in the number of followers, which is great. In our case, yeah, so it's been, I would say our experience has been overwhelmingly positive as opposed to negative. I will say that in discussing with other local government organizations, everyone is grappling with this, with social media and with how to handle it. So there's things, with certain posts, we've opted to turn off comments, for example, if we think that it's just, really imperative to get urgent information out, because that can be a real-time drain on staff resources to monitor comments. But that's another something that organizations are dealing with differently. There's a couple of camps. There's the camp that, you should never turn off comments just for transparency. And because you might get a comment that lots of people are thinking. And so that one answer can be hitting a lot of people. But then there's the other argument that it is a real resource drain, or can be. So I'd have to look at our analytics. I'm not sure how many times we have done that. Not many. So we've been able to manage handling the comments internally for the most part. We do have some messaging on our Facebook account about, and there's an automatic response that you receive if you send a message that indicates that it's not monitored outside of office hours. typically. But I will say that even just as recently as this last weekend, with multiple weather-related alerts affecting various parts of the region and highway closures, we were sharing that information over the weekend. But yes, we could definitely include some language that maybe just clarifies this a bit more and solidifies it a bit more in the policy. And because you will recall that the direction was also to take our existing social media policy and incorporate that into the communications policy as one tool that we have in our communications toolbox.
Thank you. And if I can just push on this a bit, because I think there are valid, and it sounds like we have some good processes in terms of dealing with comments or interaction back and forth. But I've been seeing some reports that in 2024, 40% of Facebook's revenue was from fraudulent advertising. And so even if our content is completely legitimate and people aren't doing anything nefarious with our specific content, one of my concerns is sort of encouraging people to go to Facebook to get information and sort of teaching them that that's the easiest place to get good information. But then they're bombarded with all this other stuff that has nothing to do with us, but is quite problematic. And so is there something to be said about, with extreme weather and so on, the level of detail? So the posts are really about, hey, for accurate emergency info, if you need the emergency info, go to this site. And so it's sort of that one sentence that directs them to our website. And with the theory or the hypothesis that people will over time learn, I'll just go to the SLRD website out of the box. And maybe that's unrealistic, but I think that's the piece I'm trying to get at. And I'm not sure if that's a shared concern with everyone. That's where I have a bit of hesitation. Sort of all the other stuff, even if we're doing everything right and no one's abusing our content, just all the other sort of nonsense that's there is it's kind of putting our really great billboard at the back of a dark alley with criminals hanging all along the way. You have to pass through all of that to get to our info, kind of thing. Director Stoner?
I hear you. I think there's super valid concerns. I think where I struggle with this is like, we obviously all have a role to play. And I think culturally we'd all do better if we just got off Facebook. And I think what I've heard from staff is, especially during emergencies, it becomes one of the core platforms within which we can keep our communities safe and get information. And so I don't personally feel comfortable at this point, like saying we're just going to go completely off of it. I think, as we've talked about, like limiting how we share information, how we interact, is a step that I'm absolutely willing to take. But it continues to be, it's a chicken and an egg. It's like, how do you get people off of it if that continues to be the place that we share information, especially in times of need. But in times of need, we need a place where people can get the information that they need. And so this continues to be, especially in, all of our communities, I think, one of the key ways for us to disseminate information. So I'm not quite there in fully directing staff to take us off of these platforms, but I very much appreciate the concerns and the discussion.
Okay, CIO Paul?
Thank you. I wanted to highlight something that I believe is excellent practice by staff, which is when sharing items and driving people to website, it's not necessarily always the SLRD website. Staff drive to the website of authority. So if it is about highway, it goes to the ministry, BC wildfire, etc. So it depends on what the nature is, so that we're not reassembling that information on our website. We're going direct to the authority, and we're encouraging that practice by people who are on these platforms.
Okay, thank you. Director Birch-Jones?
Thank you. And I completely agree with that approach. And just what CIO Paul said there in summary, I think that's the best way to manage that challenge. I did have a couple comments about looking at the current policy and some of them are covered in your survey, but just some notes. And I also see the note about just put good efforts, our best efforts into our own website and redirecting. And I also like redirecting to, the agency of authority, highways, be it, or BC Wildfire or Drive BC, however. I really like that. But yeah, I do know that the emergency Facebook is a go-to for a lot of constituents here. And so starting there, but redirecting to more authoritative, reliable sites, and a minimum amount of effort in some of those other sites and a maximum in our own site makes sense to me. I think there's references in our policy about customers, and I think we should call them constituents. And yeah, some really old language about like the administrator or his alternate. I'm sure you're going to be fixing up that kind of stuff. And I like it that directors can speak externally as long as they're observing confidentiality and not undermining staff, but recognizing that sort of our chair is our main spokesperson. There's some lines in there like those are being served, like our constituents being served, not customers. Always feeling welcomed and consistent professional image in all the business dealings. There's a lot that's good in there. And the electoral area directors, I see some of the updates from 2014 are good updates. And the references to the mail correspondence, like the newsletters that we leave at the libraries, that is all, I think, pretty much done electronically now. I can live with this. There was one comment about, I know we only take complaints in writing, but there was a comment about libelous material is returned to sender and asked to remove. Can I have a little more information about that one? But also there's right towards the end of the current policy, there's something I'd like to leave in the policy, which is the administrator shall prepare a monthly report for the regional board, highlighting the key monthly activities of departments within the organization. And I think that's something that is very positive for transparency and accountability, and I would like to keep that in. But yeah, I'll just go back to that, just asking about a bit more clarity on that managing libelous material that's in the current policy. Thank you. And thanks to staff for the report.
Director Westerholm, did you want to comment on that?
Specific to the managing libelous material, I would have to go back and revisit that. Unless CAO Paul might have some information there. This would have been an update that predates me and certainly CAO Paul, so I'm not sure around the context or the historical information around that and how that came to be, or
CO Paul?
Thank you. Staff can take that away and get answers and provide more clarity on the purpose and response for that. So we can bring that to the
That's
next meeting.
fine. I think there's opportunity to misinterpret that one. Just
Thank you. And if I can respond to the report, the monthly report to the board, as I understand it, the recommendation to remove that, and it hasn't been happening, is from predates me, and the reflection was the reports in front of you is a good reflection of monthly activity. The operational activity comes up should it be important for the board to be aware of. otherwise is managed within the contents of the organization as day-to-day operations. The quarterly reports also being a reflection, or by semi-annual reports now, being a reflection of the work being done. I think that could be dug into a little bit during strategic planning, because it is going to bubble up a little bit there on the work plans. So that's my comment and reflection on why that was removed and why it no longer takes place, is that it was providing more administrative burden for staff trying to do the work instead of listing all the work that they're doing. And the reports that are pending to come up and the reports that are being seen as a reflection of the staff work.
Okay, thank you. I'll just add, and I thank Director Birch-Jones for picking up on the customer reference. I too struggle with that, and I understand our desire to serve people and do everything we can for people that are asking for our assistance. I think it sets up, though, a I guess interpretation of this circumstance. It makes people think in terms of a for-profit corporation making money off them and sort of that sort of exchange, which isn't. We are more of a community, in my mind, helping each other. We're not making a profit. Everything, the taxes and service fees and all that goes right back into the community. So it's a different dynamic. So I do prefer a word like constituent myself. I also, to CAO Paul's point, think that if we want to change reporting on sort of operational work, that is, I think, a separate discussion in my mind that's not specific to any one policy. And we would talk about that with our general fuel reporting or that sort of thing. Like, it's not clear to me why we would have that in every communications policy and every sort of individual policy. And I'm a bit hesitant about how deeply we get into sort of operational details. For me, it comes out of, the deliverables, looking at the deliverables we have, the budgets we give, and evaluating that. Are we on budget? Do we get the deliverables we think? But again, I think from my mind that sort of reporting piece would be cut across all things, like not just communications, and would be, in my mind, a separate discussion. Does anyone else have Director Birch-Jones?
Thanks. It's just that the current policy does address internal and external communication. So if we are not going to continue to consider that in the revamped policy, it should probably be considered somewhere, somehow, by someone. So I don't think it should just be eliminated. It currently falls under this policy, which is why I brought it up.
Just so I can understand, I think our current sort of practice is as CEO Paul said, if there's an issue that the board needs to be aware of and needs to take action on, where there's a decision point for the board, that often would get raised in the CAO update, or if it was urgent, there would be, I presume, an email to the board, a special meeting or something. And so are we looking to explicitly state that, or to go beyond that? Or I just want to make sure I understand there. Director Birch-Jones, that was actually a little bit directed at you in terms of you're looking for something a little more than.
No, I was just making the point that those communication references are in the current policy. And so maybe that's something for Chair Ford to consider, as if we are removing them from the current policy or not observing them, as has been the practice, just to consider where or if they belong somewhere else. That's the point.
Okay. Okay. I wonder if I can put it to Director Westerholm, because we have a couple options proposed, but was there any specific feedback or specific questions that came out of the survey and so on that you were wanting to to hear about from the committee?
Thank you. No, I think the feedback was fairly clear. In many cases, as previously discussed, there will be some housekeeping type cleanup in terms of modernizing language, taking some of those references out to the things that we don't do any longer because of technology or otherwise. But then also with some of the areas where there might still be some further clarification from the committee and then ultimately the board on where they'd like to go. What we could do is when we come back with a draft policy, we can break it down so that we're taking each section of that current policy and then highlighting the changes that we're proposing, how we came to make those recommended changes. And then there could be another opportunity for further clarification if needed at that time. But I think that might be the best approach to sort of dissect the current policy, for lack of a better word, and make sure that we're highlighting within each section any proposed changes and updates and the rationale behind those.
Okay. So with that, it sounds like we're heading towards option 1, which is on page 30 of our report, which is that staff bring back a draft policy, updated policy to the committee for the committee's initial review. So if Director Stoner moves that, is there a seconder? Director Birch-Jones, any discussion? Director Stoner?
Yeah, just briefly, thanks to staff for the ongoing work. And I agree with all the recommendations as it was like kind of sectioned out in the report. And it was helpful to hear from our board colleagues on their feedback through the survey. Overall, it was like 83%, I think, was the effectiveness of the existing policies, which I think is pretty impressive for policies that are a decade out of date, especially when we're talking about communications and how much that has changed over the last 10 to 12 years. But a good starting place. And I think this really is just about kind of bringing them up to speed and modernizing some language as presented by staff. And so happy to direct them to continue to do that work and look forward to seeing the updated version.
Okay, thank you. So with that, not seeing any more hands, I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Not seeing any opposition, motion carries. And then I don't believe there's any late business. Nope. Okay, so looking for a motion to adjourn. Director Ford, Director Birch-Jones seconds. Any opposition? Nope. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.